There are quite a few Boltons in Lancashire. Bolton the Sands, Bolton-by-Bowland, Bolton the original, vanilla flavoured. Me and Jeannie McIntosh paid a visit to the village of Bolton-by-Bowland, which used to be called Bolton-in-Bowland back in the medieval period. Even though back then it was in the West Ridings of Yorkshire until we Lancastrians bravely rescued it. The village was recorded as Bolton in the Domesday Book, meaning, unexcitingly, the village at the bend in a river. It has two village greens for some reason, one of which contains a 13th century cross and a set of old stocks, and the other of which doesn't. It also has the ugliest sheep we've ever seen, and an ancient well, and the base of an even more ancient cross, which doesn't seem to make much sense. And two pubs, the Grade 2 listed Coach and Horses and the not Grade 2 listed Copy Nook, both of which were worth a mention because, to be honest, there's not much else worth filming round these parts. Bolton-by-Bowland isn't that far from Gisborne, the latter of which is perhaps best known for its connection to Guy of Gisborne from Robin Hood fame. However, Gisborne's far too close to the Yorkshire border for our comfort, so we didn't bother taking a look. The local church at Bolton-by-Bowland is dedicated to both St. Peter and St. Paul. Presumably the locals couldn't make up their minds as to which held more chuck with God, so they decided to hedge their bets. It was around in 1190, although most of it nowadays dates from the 13th century. It has gargoyles, which can be treated with a medicated cream these days. It has a piscina, which is always good for a laugh at parties. It has a 16th century font with a cover carved by Robert Mouseman Thompson, complete with customary mouse. It has a Flemish Baroque pulpit, on the wall behind which is an oak board dated 1703, bearing the warning to the vicar, "Woe is me if I preach not the gospel." It has pews dated to 1694. There's a tomb inside dedicated to Sir Ralph Pudsey, no relation to the Children in Need mascot. A medieval knight responsible for most of the major renovations to the building. He died in 1468 and is depicted on the tomb along with his 3 wives and 25 children. Yes, you did hear that right. Obviously, there wasn't much else to do in Bolton-by-Bowland during the 15th century. His 3rd wife, Edwina, no connection to the head of the British Egg Board, was particularly virile, or very competitive, producing 17 of the 25 aforementioned offspring by herself, with Sir Ralph's help, of course. Close to the church stood Bolton Hall. It was demolished in the 1950s, which was a shame because it dated back to 1346, when Sir John de Pudsey's old house burnt down. Arson was suspected and William Pudsey was taken to court, but escaped conviction because of his distinguished war record, apparently. It was here that William Pudsey, another William Pudsey presumably, although I'm not very good at calculating dates, hid King Henry VI after the Battle of Hexham in a specially constructed well house, known to this day, somewhat bizarrely, as the King Harry. I was going to say hidden underground like Saddam Hussein, but that probably wouldn't have gone down very well with any royalist viewers. Apparently, the Coach and Horses still use water from the well in the production of their beer. You can only hope that it isn't still used as a bath then. William Pudsey was a bit of a character, to say the least. When his old man, Ralph, kicked the bucket, he'd spent the family fortune. Historians claim it was on the renovations to the church, but 25 kids wouldn't have been cheap to maintain. Fortunately, however, William had a stroke of luck when he encountered a group of fairies in the woods near Skirden Brook. I'm only repeating what the history books have recorded here. I'm not about to comment on their accuracy. Said fairies took pity on William's financial plight and presented him with a magical silver bit, which when placed in his horse's mouth gave it special powers. They also told him to mine at Skelhorn near Downham, where he'd find a rich seam of silver. Naturally, William took their advice. He'd have been a bit of a birk not to, really. Soon he was minting his own silver coins at the appropriately named Mint Cottage, just outside the village, each one embossed with the family emblem, the Pudsey Star. Unfortunately, as it turned out, minting your own money was an illegal act, punishable by death. One night in Clitheroe, one of his miners clumsily dropped his purse on the pub floor, and some of the coins that spilled out found their way to London. The game was up. Soldiers were sent to Bolton Hall, but William spotted them just in the nick of time and managed to escape on horseback. Following an exciting but impossible to stage in a cheap film like this chase, several mounted soldiers cornered him above the 90-foot precipice over Skirden Brook called Rainsby Scar. With the enchanted bit still in his horse's gob, he leapt off the cliff. His horse soared over Rainsby Scar and made the other side, according to the history books. The cliff has been known as Pudsey's Leap ever since. Later on, his godmother, Good Queen Betty, pardoned him, which was nice. So it turned out that the fairies were a complete waste of time. Let's not even go into the historical details and chronological inaccuracies. To be honest, none of the dates in this lot even remotely add up, but folklore is as folklore does. As we said though, Bolton Hall was demolished in the 1950s and the old pair of boots, gloves and a spoon, allegedly left in haste by Henry VI, were auctioned off. The ground that the hall originally occupied, nowadays known as King Henry's Mews, is privately owned with no public access, so Sodom. Okay, one last aside before we bugger off. As mentioned earlier, back in 1974, large areas of the Forest of Bowland, including Bolton-by-Bowland, obviously, were passed into the sensible, considerate hands of the Lancastrian administration from the clawed, sweaty clutches of Yorkshire. In the process, Lancashire County Council had the tops of any signposts bearing the name Yorkshire hacksawed off to avoid confusion. I can't say that I blame them, really. You know the score. Like, subscribe, notification bell, same time, same place, ASAP.
Robin Hood, riding through the glen. Robin Hood, with his band of men. Cheered by the bad, loved by the good. Robin Hood, Robin Hood, Robin Hood.